Right then, I was out the other day for the first time in ages with my friend Robin, and we headed off to the Peak District in northern England. Now, the Peak District is a beautiful area we've visited many times, but on this occasion the forecast was, well, it's pants. It was absolutely terrible, and it didn't let us down. Throughout the whole day it rained. Now, I knew it was going to rain, to be honest. All the forecasters said it was going to rain. So I had to go equipped. Now, I'd loved the idea of going out with my beautiful Nikon primes on a lovely manual focus body, but it wasn't going to work. You ain't going to be changing lenses when it's blowing a gale and throwing rain at you like by a bucket. So I decided to take my old faithful. Now, this is my Nikon F80. I love these cameras, by the way. I've always banged on about them. I think they're superb. Nikon F80, and it's a Tamron 28-200 zoom. It's my bad weather outfit. I take it all the time. And this was going to be the only thing I took with me. This is all I took. And I decided as well, with the weather being somewhat inclement, I would go with black and white film, surprisingly. Not surprisingly, of course, with me. And I chose Ilford XP2. Now, I'm not going to get into the reasons why on this video, because I'm going to do a separate video all about chromogenic black and white and why you might want to consider it. But anyway, I took that with me, which is a little bit slow for the conditions. Potentially, I should have been able to push the film a stop or two. Yeah, so anyway, please have a look now at the video, the trip out. It's only 5 minutes, yeah, just indulge me. And then we'll come back and we'll get on to the important bit, looking at the images and actually making a real print. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I rather did actually, despite it being a complete soaking and having to dry the camera out for a couple of hours later. I've always said it with bad weather. It's bad weather, but often good photos. Now, I think that sort of mist up on the tops really captured the atmosphere of the place. And the images I showed you in the video, they are done in Lightroom. They're manipulated in Lightroom very gently. There's not too much to it. Add a little bit of grain, add a little bit of a vignette to it. Kept the shadows quite light. I wanted to give it that sort of open feeling as opposed to being too dark and moody. But really for me, the big thing is like, what am I going to do in terms of making a real print from one of these negatives, one of these 35mm negatives. And I think it's got to be a darkroom print. It has to be a darkroom print. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head off to the darkroom. Well, not tonight really. It's going to be tomorrow night actually. I haven't got time now. But I'm going to head off to the darkroom and I'm going to make a Lith print. Now, Lith printing is a technique I haven't covered at all in any videos. I've done a lot of Lith printing in the past. However, the materials available these days, they're not so good. So I have a limited option in terms of papers, but I do have a couple of papers I'm thinking of working with to give me that sort of texture, that feel, that look I want, which I got part way there with the digital ones, but there's nothing like a real darkroom print. So let's wrap up here now and head off down to the darkroom and yeah, make that print. Alright then, I chose my Foma paper as the best option for this Lith print. It gives a very warm image. It's a lovely sheen to this 532 nature as well. It's probably my favourite Lith paper available at the moment. So into the darkroom, pretty much set up before I started. I got my enlarger set up with my 50mm 2.8 EL Nikkor. Now the first thing I do when I'm doing any form of printing, even Lith printing, is to establish my test print. And you do this by exposing the paper in increments, a bit more exposure for each setting, so you end up with a test strip which gives you the ideal time to base your development on, your exposure on for the real print. Into the developer, quick wash. Now what I'm looking for here is the right area of density in both the highlights and the shadows. And when I'm making a Lith print, I start with F11. And I open up 3 stops to F4 when I choose the right time. So you can see on here I've got a good selection of densities and I went for the center one pretty much. Now that gave me a time of 45 seconds at F4 with no filters. So quite a long exposure, but that's what Lith prints need, a lot of light. So I keep my paper in a little paper safe. Very easy to access, stops the light getting in. Easy to work with rather than opening the packages every time. Stick it in the easel and clip it into place. And this is a full frame 35mm print I'm making with no extra cropping really, it's just the whole thing. So yes, use my little foot switch now to start the operation. It avoids me touching any controls and knocking anything. And 45 seconds of exposure, which is a long time, but Lith printing, as I said, needs a lot of light. The chemicals are very, very dilute indeed, and it needs a lot of time to soak up the light so it'll actually form some image on the paper. My expensive darkroom timer, about £4.99, and that just lets me time how long I'm in the chemicals for. Now this very badly exposed and very soft footage is me developing the Lith sheet. Now this takes about 6 minutes in this particular paper. Some papers will take up to half an hour, so yeah, you can get very, very bored doing this. And you can see now the images come up. Now this is about 3 or 4 minutes in, and you have to keep monitoring the blacks. The blacks are what you're looking for. And you're going to have something called a snatch point. And the snatch point is when you decide that the blacks have enough density. And at that point, you've got to be really quick. And you've got to lift it straight out the developer and put it into the stop bath. No time for dripping off because it will actually overexpose the paper. It's a very quick stage. There we go. Into the stop bath there. And that freezes the development. Okay. Let it drain off after about 15-20 seconds and into the fixer for 1 minute. Okay, then a quick preliminary wash, quick rinse, quick look at it, assess the tones, the highlights, the shadows, the colour, and I typically leave it in this tray for about 10 minutes then for some of the bleach to leach out before I give it a proper archival wash in one of my little print washers here. I've got 10 prints going, so yeah, a whole batch of evening's work. Now another thing I did right at the end of the session was to do one quick print using a paper called Slavic Unibrom. I have used it years ago in the past, but never really progressed with it. And it shows promise. Now that's an awful print. I only made one right at the end of the session, but definitely worth revisiting. Right, well that's the prints made, and I've made about about 8 or 9 copies, so there are some for sale on my website if you're interested. Links in the description below. Now, I was quite pleased with the colour rendering and the tones I got in the image. It's very obviously very warm. That's the Lith print, and it's got that sort of subtlety which you only really get in the shadows with a Lith print. It's sort of got a more of a three-dimensional look. Now, I did also try selenium toning. One copy to try and get the sheen off it, and it cooled it down a bit, and yeah, it's given it a bit more punch in the blacks, but overall I think I prefer the original version, so I've just got the one copy which is selenium toned. Oh, and I've had a haircut, by the way. I hope you can appreciate the difference. Yes, I really enjoy Lith printing. It's quite different to conventional printing, and I also need to revisit that Slavich paper for a more gritty look. It's extremely cold toned and very coarse and grainy, and I think I'm going to need to do a bit of research as to how to get the most out of it. But yeah, very enjoyable. So I hope you did enjoy this this trip into the darkroom and out into the wet countryside of northwest England. Probably going back out there pretty soon again, because it is fantastic. Those rocks and those formations up there are just something else. I've never seen anything like them before, to be honest. So yes, thank you very much for coming along, and I'll see you soon.